Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, it's an important and timely topic for debate, the climate change subject and the future of nuclear energy in the state of Pennsylvania. All of that following these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, I guess if you're alive and paying any attention to national politics as well as state politics, you know that there's a huge debate going on about energy and climate change, and I think we need to do something about engaging that debate on this program. We're going to talk for a few minutes today about the climate change debate in Pennsylvania, and I couldn't have two better guests. Joining me, sitting across from the table from me, is Terry Bossert. He's a partner with Post Schell. He's a former chief counsel for the Department of Environmental Protection, and he's a member of a climate change advisory committee that we're going to talk about. And then from the Pennsylvania Chamber, she's a director of Governmental Affairs, is Stephanie Wissman. Thank both of you for being on the program. All right, look, let's get down to this. Before I want to get into what are the concerns specifically about what we should do about climate change and a report. But what is the report that is now creating some controversy in this state over climate change rules and regulations? Terry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, there's actually two reports. One is finished, and that's called the Impact Report, and that was published a few weeks ago. Mm-hmm. And that predicts what the impacts of climate change will be in Pennsylvania on various sectors. And then later there will be a so-called action plan report, which will deal with ways to address the impacts that were predicted in the impact report.
So let me understand this. There's a report that says this is what the impact of climate change is on a variety of energy capacities, let's say.
Or agriculture.
Or agriculture, yeah, okay. Right. And then following it, will there have to be legislation to implement the report? Is that what we're really talking about here?
Yes. The action report will have recommendations that will be implemented either by the legislature or by regulation.
Right. All right. Stephanie, let's go to some specifics here. When we hear this climate change report terminology all the time, give me a broad brush about what we're talking about here and what our viewers, what Pennsylvanians should think about when they hear, when we get into the subject of climate change, particularly for our state.
Absolutely. Global warming was the first term that we've probably always heard about, global warming. Now that's morphed into something called climate change. Mm-hmm. And what that means is, and it questions the greenhouse gas emissions that are emitted into our atmosphere, what impact that may have on the global temperatures. Now, that includes not only naturally occurring greenhouse gas emissions, such as through natural processes,
like in
animals,
agriculture,
plants.
Sure.
Exactly. But then there's also the concern about greenhouse gas emissions that are being emitted by mankind. And so that's what we're looking at. What is the balance there between the natural processes of climate change versus those that are attributed to mankind?
Okay, so in other words, the bulk of them, Terry, would concern the energy productivity aspects in this state, like whether we're talking about coal or carbon from automobile. I mean, all of that. Right. Is that going to come under stricter regulation in this state as a result of these changes that you're talking about?
Well, certainly some of the recommendations could lead to that, could lead to legislation that would have stricter controls. But I think it's important to remember that there's two sides of that coin. One is the energy generation and how that's going to be accomplished. The other is the energy usage. Yeah. And obviously, if you can conserve and reduce demand, you have to produce less, and therefore...
And we're a big energy-producing state, so when we start talking about control of energy sources and how much carbon, let's just use that from they emit, we've got to deal with the relationship between employment, jobs, the energy production that goes on in the state on the one hand, and the benefits to be saved from how we prohibit or prevent more carbon emission. Do I got that about right? I mean, is that the balance that we're really trying to achieve?
I think so, and that's exactly right. What we're saying at the Chamber, the State Chamber is saying, look, we're going to look at climate change. It's so important to balance the needs of the economy, making sure you preserve economic growth, okay, while going ahead and trying to put in those environmental protections. There's got to be that delicate balance there, because you do not want to economically disadvantage businesses in Pennsylvania by any sort of climate change mandate.
All right, we're going to go to a quick break. When I come back, I want to parse that out and get into some of the specifics so our viewers have a better idea of what we're talking about. Back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by PAConstructionJobs.com. For more information about rewarding careers in the highway construction industry, visit PAConstructionJobs.com. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to Pennsylvania Newsmakers. We're talking about a very important subject, a big climate debate. Terry, let me go back. Look, the House has passed by a slim majority of the federal Congress an energy bill that's very controversial. Let's be candid.
Right.
Folks aren't sure that it's going to, that version is going to get out of the Senate, the United States Senate. Without getting into the details of that, tell me what you think the relationship is between a Pennsylvania climate change program and the federal government. What should happen there?
Well, that relationship is very complex, because on the one hand, if the legislation passes something close to what passed the House, Pennsylvania will have to have a program to do something to comply with some federal mandates. Yeah. On the other hand, the federal legislation is going to, in and of itself, create substantial reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, and Pennsylvania needs to be careful that it doesn't disadvantage itself in the national scheme, that it doesn't rush ahead and do something that then turns out to be economically counterproductive and maybe not environmentally necessary, because the feds will already have covered that.
Or that the state has to go back and review and change. So you could have a big, I mean, you're over on the Hill, as we say, the Hill, you know, in Harrisburg, paying a lot of attention to this. I mean, we could do something here that could be, that the legislature would have to, and the governor would have to completely redo. Is this something, I'll put it as starkly as I can, should this all be put on hold for about 6, 8, who knows how long, until the feds get done to see if they're going to pass a bill? Does that make sense?
The Chamber's always been of that opinion, yes. We've always said, you know, there's something moving at the federal level. Not only that, climate change is definitely not bound by, you know, boundaries. Air is not bound by geographical boundaries. What we've said, this is a federal issue, argue a global issue. So why we would want to deal with climate change at a state level, you would create a patchwork quilt, if you will, of different regulations that becomes very costly for the regulated community. So in the Chamber's view, it would be prudent to wait to see what happens at the federal level. Because again, I don't think we want to disadvantage ourselves economically by doing something more stringent than what may come out of the federal government.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Terry, let me pursue another aspect of this. Does this report, without, you know, we don't have enough time to get into all the details, does it sort of spell out by various categories, whether we're talking about, you know, emissions in agriculture and certain industries, does it spell out degrees or percentages of reductions of gas house emissions? Is that what the goal ultimately is in the state?
Yes. The department, I believe, and the committee has discussed this, has a goal of getting a certain percentage of reductions from a baseline year, which they've picked 2005 as a baseline year, and then they want to get you know, at least 20% reduction by the year 2020.
So let me get this straight. So we went back to 2005 and they said this is what they say are the gas house emissions across a variety of fields, whether it be certain, you know, in agriculture or industry, and then they want a 20% reduction out of those industries, agriculture including, by 2020. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Now the federal government, we're going to have to run to a break. But the federal government, in the federal legislation, as I recall, aren't the standards stricter in the federal that they're proposing in the Senate? Do either of you know, or in the House version that passed?
I believe the House version was 17%.
So this would be higher than the federal standard.
Slightly.
Yes.
All right, we'll be back. We're talking about climate change. It's an important subject, something we're going to hear a lot more about in the months ahead, and we'll do that after these messages.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hey, welcome back to the program. We're talking about climate change and how important it is. And in Pennsylvania, there is not arguably some changes in the offing. We're talking about those changes. Terry, I want to get into something that I think is fairly important. When we think of this, this isn't a question for Fortune 500 companies and all the big industries that produce energy. This is something that everyday Pennsylvanians need to be concerned about because these changes will affect them right where they live.
They certainly will. Everything from the changes that go on the power producers will generate through to utility rate changes, but maybe more significantly, some of the action plans really deal with things like green buildings, having energy audits for houses before they're put on the market, having building code standards that require more energy efficient construction. Now, the experts say that those kinds of changes have a 3, 5, 7, depending who you listen to, year payback. In other words, you save on utilities by having a more energy efficient. Yeah. But those things, standards in the federal legislation and state plan probably will also have energy efficiency standards for appliances. So all of that's going to make a difference.
So this is going to affect literally everybody, basically where they live and what they consume. Sure. and how they lead their lives. Before I let you go, what does the Chamber think in this report, which may lead to legislative action down the line? I think that's what we talked about earlier and concluded. What's the Chamber's position on what should happen with this report and the future?
Regarding the climate change action plan going forward? We believe that all forms of energy must be on the table, okay? When you look at energy consumption, it's definitely going to be going up. It's not going to be going down. What the Chamber would like to see is that all forms of energies be viable options, in addition to your traditional resources such as natural gas, coal, nuclear. You also will need the alternative forms of energy, such as wind and solar.
Right.
But what we're saying is all of these energies must be used because alone they're not going to be able to meet that energy demand going forward. So don't crowd out those traditional forms of energies that have been at the backbone of our economy for centuries. Make sure they definitely play a part in the mix going forward.
All right. Well, look, we'll get back to this subject and we'll follow it because it's an important one. It's going to have I mean, we're a huge energy producing state, and this balance between the environment and making sure that we're environmentally friendly and keeping jobs. I mean, that is an important balance that presumably both sides at some point can reach some agreement on, because we have to have a good environment, but we also have to have jobs. And in an energy-producing state like Pennsylvania, that's been historically important. Yep. Hey, thanks for coming on. All right,
thank you. Talking
about energy, the future of nuclear energy in the state of Pennsylvania, that's coming up after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, this is, our energy show? Of course it is, and now we're going to talk a little bit about the future of nuclear energy in our state. Joining me is Corrina Vecsey Wilson. She's sitting right across from me. She's an advisory board member of the Pennsylvania Energy Alliance and a member of the Pennsylvania Utility Commission. And we've had a few of your colleagues on over the years. Robert Powelson, otherwise known as Rob on occasion, but you're commissioner to me.
Great to be here, Terry.
Well, we're glad to have you. All right, let's talk a little bit about the Energy Alliance. Why is there a need for an alliance of energy producers? Do I got that right?
No, these are citizens. This is business and community leaders.
So it's a whole bunch of folks.
Mm-hmm. This is really more of the grassroots, third-party, non-government, interested party. We're just people, citizens like myself. I have no professional relationship to this issue.
Okay.
We're just people who believe in nuclear energy as part of what should be in our mix, and even more so. And we advocate policies in Pennsylvania that protect our environment and improve our economy to deal with nuclear energy.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about the specifics of this. Look, Pennsylvania has several nuclear power plants. Nuclear power over the last few years has become what some argue is a viable option, right? Because it's carbon-free. Do I got that right, Commissioner? You're going to correct me. That's why you're here, to make sure I got this all right. What is going on specifically in Pennsylvania with the debate to expand the use of nuclear energy?
Well, right now, this is more complicated, and I will defer to the Commissioner on some of the highly technical points, but what Pennsylvania Energy Alliance is doing is advocating the inclusion of nuclear energy uprates, which is a technical term, as a qualifying resource under a proposed bill in the House, House Bill 80, Alternative Energy Portfolio Standards.
All right, talk about where we stand right now with nuclear power in the state. Bring our viewers up to speed.
Well, we look at Pennsylvania. We're the second largest nuclear production state in the Union. With that, we have the industry has gone through kind of a 50-year trajectory from TMI to where we are now. Mm-hmm. And Pennsylvania is in a very unique position because we are now, in 2011, all of our electric utilities will be in a competitive marketplace, meaning the old nuclear units that were part of rate base, which the three of us paid for those inefficiencies, are now part of the investor-owned community. So what has happened in Pennsylvania? Well, let's look at all the nuclear capacity factors. Well, in the late 70s, those plants were operating at best at 70% capacity factors, output. Those plants now, on average in 2008, had 94.7% output factors. So the industry has evolved. Nuclear outage rates or refueling of plants have gone from 104 days in 1990 to 2008, where it's down to 30 days. So it's
well, let's go to the heart of the matter. I mean, it's my understanding that the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and other agencies in Washington, they're going through this complicated process to relicense, right? And so, in order to expand nuclear energy anywhere, there are these federal requirements. Where does that stand?
Well, there's two components. There's, on the new build side, you have the Federal Guaranteed Loan Program, which is $18.5 billion. And then, yes, many of we'll say the lifespans of these plants need to go through retrofit, steam generators. Right. So right now, Pennsylvania, on the new nuke side, we have a potential exciting initiative with PPL, taking the Bell Bend site up at Berwick, working with Unistar Nuclear. That is a new build that could come to Pennsylvania, and then to the point of nuclear uprates, which is a huge opportunity for the Pennsylvania economy, because the supply chain that goes into these nuclear plants and the job creation piece is enormous.
Yeah.
What do you, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I think what really strikes me as a Pennsylvania citizen taxpayer, we have 4,000 jobs associated just with the 3 nuclear plants in this region. There are 2 more. There are 5 altogether and potential 6. But it supplies a third of our current electricity, our own nuclear plants. And it's just it's a tremendous resource that, you know, if we're almost maxed out, I think it behooves us to look at this as a carbon-free, great source of energy that we have to support it.
And you know, the politics of it seemed to me, and I don't want to get, you know, particularly you, Commissioner, too much involved in this, but I think Governor Rendell has indicated he's supportive of it. There seems to be a changing attitude in the legislature and with the governor for nuclear. Do either of you know anything about that, or what's your general sense about that?
As a rookie commissioner and just going through the reconfirmation process, one of the things that I pitched House and Senate leadership on to support this industry, because again, I mentioned earlier, second largest producing nuclear state, is get a nuclear caucus. We have coal caucuses. Start embracing the concept and having a dialogue to understand this industry. The governor is pro-nuclear. He is also, you know, obviously we're going through a renaissance with renewable investment. Right. But I've heard it in the prior conversation you had here today, is that balance, striking that balance. Well, that base load, that 34% base load that's produced by nuclear power, you know, we're gonna have huge demands here in Pennsylvania over the next 8 years to continue that. So when we hear initiatives like nuclear uprates, I'd call it a no-brainer option.
All right, we have about a minute left. How do you respond to the concerns about the hazardous waste disposal and all of that? I mean, there's 2 sort of issues. One is the hazardous waste disposal, and then there's the safety. It's an unfair thing. We have, you know, about 45 seconds.
Well, you know, I'm not a nuclear power plant engineer or anything like that, but I can say that the safety of these plants, the statistics that I understand to be true, is safer to work at a nuclear power plant than it is to work in banking, finance, and manufacturing. So, I mean, and they have redundant safety features. I think the industry has taken all of its experience here and abroad.
And go ahead.
Well, it's a public policy failure at the national level to deal with Yucca Mountain. Because if you shut Yucca down, you still have to deal with the issue. And right now, just for your listeners, that spent fuel is on site.
All right, you get the last word, Commissioner. We'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers. And as always, stay well,